I'll call the meeting to order at 6:09. Will you join me in the salute to the flag, please? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
For roll, I will call Chair Machen.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez. Here. Commissioner Quill. Here. Commissioner Woolward. Here. Okay. Commissioners Ebley and Ebley and Liang are excused. Vice Chair Durr is absent. We have quorum.
Would you like to read the consent agenda, please?
Yes, Chair and Commissioners. I would also like to note that all of these items will be heard and voted on by one time at the Planning Commission unless anybody wants to pull an item from consent. There are 6 items on the consent calendar this evening. The first item is approval of the minutes from April 10, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Item 2 is a request to extend a existing tentative tract map 16533, and that is a 37.2 acre parcel proposed to be subdivided into 50 lots for the construction of 48 single-family homes. I would like to note that there is one additional condition that staff is recommending be added to that to that item. This would be condition number 27, and I will read it into the record. The applicant, by the way, does agree to this. This is something that Public Works staff, community development staff, and the applicant have worked out. And the condition for the record is the street improvements for Verdemont Drive, as shown on the City of San Bernardino drawing number 11885, sheet 3, shall be constructed as part of the improvements for tract 16533. The improvements for this portion of Verdemont Drive, shall include asphalt paving and other improvements as shown on that plan. Tract 16502, which is the adjoining, the developer has 2 different tracts, one north and one south of Verdemont Drive. Tract 16502 shall maintain the current street improvement bond and shall build those improvements, shall maintain the improvement bond and shall build those improvements should any unforeseen circumstances occur within a 2-year period starting at the approval of the condition to 16533. And the reason for that, again, is the developer has a tract north and south of Verdemont Drive. There are some existing public improvements that make sense to be built as part of the later tract. So instead of building the improvements and then ripping up the street when the northerly tract is built, we are deferring the other half of those improvements. So that would be new condition 27. I would also like to point out that the resolution number is 2018-028. The printed agenda actually says 023. So that should be new condition 27 on resolution 28. We always like to keep the commission on their toes. We do apologize for the error. The third item on the consent calendar is extension of time, 1-year extension of time for conditional use permit 14-14, which is the demolition and reconstruction of a restaurant, Carl's Jr. at 524 South Inland Center Drive. That should be resolution number 29 instead of resolution 24. Staff would recommend that that conditional use permit also be extended for 1 year. The fourth item on the consent calendar is an extension of time for a development permit at 957 Reese Street, and this is for Berkeley Environmental. It involves a street abandonment that was recently approved by the City Council, and then subsequent construction of a new storage yard for Berkeley Environmental. That resolution should also be renumbered to Resolution 30. So it's Resolution 2018-30. Number 5 on the consent calendar, this is a conditional use permit 17-28 for a new ABC facility located at 2715 West Foothill Boulevard. Staff is recommending that the public hearing on that be continued to June 12th and not at tonight's meeting. And then item number 6 on the consent calendar is also a continuance, and this is continuance of a Development Code Amendment 17-09, Conditional Use Permit 17-29, and public necessity and convenience for a new building at 1195 South Waterman Avenue. Again, staff is recommending that that public hearing be continued to June 12th. And with that, staff is recommending approval of items 1 through 6 on the consent calendar.
I'd like to make a motion approving the consent calendar, items 1 through 6, including the modifications as read to the record.
We have a motion and a second, but I would like to hold the vote until I ask for comments. Does anyone wish to comment on this item? That's the consent calendar. If not, I'll call for the vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries. Public hearing items. The Planning Commission will first hear a report from staff, and then the public hearing will be opened. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak. Next, members of the public will be allowed to speak. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak must be sworn in and also fill out a request to speak form. The forms are located on the table by the door. When your name is called, come forward and speak into the microphone, say and spell your name, and give your address for the taped record. After all have spoken, the applicant will be allowed to respond. The public hearing will then be closed, and the Planning Commission will begin deliberations and make a decision. All actions except general plan amendments and amendments to the Municipal Development Code are final action unless an appeal is filed and fee paid within 15 days to the Community Development Department. If you challenge the resultant action of the Planning Commission in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this agenda or in written correspondence delivered to the Community Development Department at or prior to the public hearing. And this brings us to item 7 on the agenda, Development Permit Type P 18-01. Staff report, please.
Chair, if I may, I think it would be appropriate to swear in any of the speakers here this evening that would like to give comment.
All those wishing to speak, if you would stand and raise your right hand, please. Okay. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this body will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. Thank you. Please be seated.
Development Permit Type P 18-01. This is an adaptive reuse project of an existing office building. So this is actually the second adaptive reuse project that we've brought to the city for an existing office building.
It will be modified for use or conversion to 15 one and two bedroom apartment units. Exterior modifications will be made to the building to give it more residential features and refresh the site and update it. It is also actually within the same neighborhood as the other adaptive reuse project, and the intent here, the first adaptive reuse project was kind of catty corner down here on 16th and Arrowhead, and so we're basically across the street. The intent here is to actually make overall improvements to an area rather than just one specific site here and there. The developer is not trying for one-off projects. They're really trying to make improvements in the area in general. And so there's the aerial photo of the site. Again, you can see it's basically on the corner of 16th and Arrowhead. The site plan is not really anything too specific there, other than just showing that 15 units will be developed here. And again, refreshing the site, kind of updating it from its current architecture so that it has a more residential feel, and will also be consistent and compatible with the other adaptive reuse site across the street. So these are the existing conditions at this site. This is looking west from Arrowhead Avenue and looking northeast from 16th Street. The recommendation tonight is that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2018-027, forwarding a recommendation to the Mayor and City Council to adopt the categorical exemptions pursuant to Section 15301 of CEQA for existing facilities, and approve development permit type P 18-01 based on the findings of fact and subject to the conditions of approval. I can take any questions.
Commissioners? Yes.
Looking at the site plan, I'm assuming the fire department has approved this whole project?
Yes.
You don't have any problem with egress or... Okay, because I drove by there yesterday just out of curiosity what it looked like. I thought I saw a problem with that, but...
It's tight for sure, but I've actually went out with the developer and the fire department and made an inspection of the site, and they actually have, it's hard to see from this photo here, but because the building was developed for commercial offices, they have a larger water main system and a larger, I think it's for the fire sprinkler system. So they actually exceed the standards for fire in that regard, which kind of helps alleviate the fact that the site is a little bit tight to get in and to. And they're still able to get their trucks in and out of there.
So you actually answered my next question, because the building is, existing building is fire sprinklered,
Yes.
and it meets residential?
It exceeds.
That's a good thing, yeah. What about, I'm just looking at the fire department again, are they required 2-hour separation firewalls between units, or in the attic spaces, or?
Typically, it would be 1 hour separation between each unit.
Would you mind actually going up to the podium?
Go ahead. Say my name. Okay, Amanda Busby, project designer. So typically in between, for apartments like this, we would design for a 1 hour separation in between units, and the building is also fire sprinklered. So obviously that needs to be retrofitted for the current new design.
Oh, so each unit will have a 1 hour separation?
Yes, that's
Oh.
proposed.
Okay. Out of curiosity, is each unit going to be metered separately, utility-wise, or?
For electricity. Yes.
What about handicap? Are there going to be requirements to have a minimum of one unit handicap or anything like
We
that?
actually propose that all the downstairs units on the two-story building will be handicap accessible, which I believe is 5 units that will be automatically designed to accommodate for that.
Okay. So they are dedicated?
As of right now, that's the intent. That during the planning commission, they had kind of asked if we could at least accommodate this lower section, so which is 5 units.
That certainly sounds doable. You've got you've got a real challenge on setbacks, I can tell.
Yes.
But I see the renderings. It looks pretty good.
Yeah. We can go back to that. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw and see that, that's pretty good looking challenge right there. Setback. That's it. Like I said, I drove by it yesterday to just see what it looked like, and it looked like there was a lot of other units around there that kind of fit in that category of residential.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Are these 2-bedroom apartments?
There are, right now, I'm trying to remember exactly how many are 2-bedroom. I think on the floor plan, I didn't bring a copy. There are some 2-bedroom, and then the rest are 1-bedroom.
So where would the residents park compared to this in the front?
So the parking, the parking is actually, yes, that is the entire parking lot. And I believe that it was accommodated for 1 parking space per bedroom was what was planned out in the design.
What is that building that's a single story? What is that?
That is also, those are just a single, so those are also apartments. That is, the existing structure currently right now, that is how it is. We're just rehabbing it to look like actual apartments. So that would, the single story would not be the handicap accessible units. It would actually be the lower level of the 2-story building.
Is the project going to have an on-site apartment manager or business office as people come? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. As I recall, you had another project that we approved in Arrowhead. Has that started being constructed, or?
We are in the process of drafting the construction drawings. That has gone through City Council,
Okay.
and it's been approved.
And I think you also had renovated apartments over on 9th and G, and those look very nice. Have those been rented out already? Yes. So it's at full capacity?
Correct.
I'm looking for an apartment. No, not really. But I just wanted to know, because I did see it. I couldn't tell if it was occupied, but the renovations did look nice, and it's fully occupied with tenants and stuff. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question about the parking. Will you have assigned parking spaces for each unit, or will it be first come, first served?
So that issue, we have mixed feelings on, and we are looking at that in both ways as far as from some different consultants. But there will be at least sufficient parking for, each bedroom unit has 1 parking space. Assigned probably is our preference at this point.
I have a question. Did you mention that you'll have 24/7 on-site landlord or management?
Property manager on site, correct.
Property manager on site. I would imagine the gates, or you have gates that open, close, and security cameras and that
It's
type
fully
of thing.
gated and camera, yes.
All right, thank you.
Anything else from the commission? If not, I'll call for public comments. Deb Matley.
Good evening. My name is Deb Matley, D-E-B-M-A-T-L-E-Y. I live at 380 West 17th Street. So I'm basically near 17th and D, which is just kitty corner. I'm on the far side. I don't share the alley with this development. It has been a problem for years. We almost had it torn down with code enforcement, and it was bought by the previous owners. The problem I have with this development is we do not need any more denseness to housing. That is a building and a parking lot. There's nowhere for children to play. Our closest parks are Paris Hill Park and the 9th Street Park. They would have to go through some pretty rough neighborhoods to get to a park to play. There's just a tiny strip of grass, and then we have parking problems in the neighborhood. If you drive down Arrowhead at night, it's a mess. If you've got one-bedroom units, you're going to have probably a husband and a wife. You've got 2 cars. That extra car is going to end up on the street. We don't get our curbs swept because it's too dense with parking in that area because the sweepers can't get it, and there is no process where the city mandates you have to move your car before 7 a.m. when the street sweepers come in. So we get a lot of trash. It's just, this is too dense for the neighborhood. Across the street is the Gray Apartments at 16th and D. That place is a nightmare. We're constantly calling the police department on it. We get a lot of crime from that area. So I can't see this. I spoke to my councilman last night, and he had the developer call me today. We asked the developer, Mr. Howie, to postpone this meeting so that our neighborhood could sit down and talk with him, and he said that he could not do that. So that's one thing that, we want to work with him to try to make this work. We don't want an abandoned building there, but on the flip side, we don't need more denseness. I mean, we're in a census tract that is I think in the top 100 of California for denseness. It's just, we can't keep piling people on top of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne, is it Sanchez?
Hi, Yvonne Sanchez, YVONNE SANCHEZ. And I disagree with this development, and I just came to support my neighborhood. The only concern that I have also is the crime rate that, especially with the alley walkway, there's always trash being dumped back there, and like Debbie mentioned, the safety for the children, especially not having access to a backyard or an extra area to play. And then, again, I mentioned the crime rate, just afraid that it's just going to escalate even more. Right now, we have tried to decrease the crime rate and being proactive in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Everett Seaman.
Hello, my name is Everett Seaman. It's EVERETTSEAMAN. I don't want this thing in my neighborhood. We have so much crime from the Dama apartments down the street. Even the Gray Apartments park on our street. We can't park in front of our house at night because of all the cars that are everywhere. And that's from Arrowhead. They're parking on our street. And we have a cul-de-sac. They're in our... At night, you can't park nowhere. It's ridiculous. And I don't want this in my... The kids, where are they going to go? They're going to be in our yards playing, doing all their stuff in our yards. And it's we're already over this. It's too much. We don't want it in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. John Matley.
Good evening. My name is John Matley, M-A-T-L-E-Y. I live at 380 West 17th Street, so a little less than a block away from this development. I, and along with almost everybody that I've talked to in my neighborhood, are opposed to this development. It's really hard to find an actual positive with the proposal. It's in the middle of, as you've heard, one of the most densely packed neighborhoods in all of Southern California. Hard to imagine a bunch of 1- and 2-story buildings, but if you look at the census data, I think it's like a top 30, top 50 census tract density in Southern California. Crime is a big problem just to the east, right across Waterman, most notably that gray apartment complex you heard us talking about. This is a apartment complex that the city for decades has not been able to get its hands around. We believe that the density of that and the lack of good management of that facility leads to the fact that the police basically need to open an annex at that facility on Friday and Saturday nights. More density in that area is not going to help the problem. As for potential downsides, there are many we can see. First of all, I'd like to say we dispute most of the findings of fact that came out of the Design Review Committee. Specifically, I'll go into a few. One of the findings of fact says that there's plenty of infrastructure. As you've heard, drive down Waterman after in the evening around 6 o'clock. It is so densely parked up on, not Waterman, I mean Arrowhead. Drive up Arrowhead between Baseline and Highland in the evening. Cars are parked on the corners and the intersections. They're parked across alleyways. I can't drive out of the alley between 17th and 18th because cars are parked on the street right there. And this is up and down the street. It's all over the place. There's not enough parking, and we know there's going to be more than the average number of occupants for a one-bedroom apartment. There is going to be more than one person. We know that, right? The nearest park, they say there's plenty of access to parks and community centers. We know that the nearest park is Paris Hill. You'd have to walk through one of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods in the entire city and then negotiate Waterman. That makes it basically unavailable to the children that live there. And we know that the police already cannot lock down the problems of crime that are coming out of the density from that area. I spoke briefly with Mr. Howie, and I believe are you Mr. Howie? Yeah. So I spoke with him briefly this evening. We did ask him to postpone this so that we could bring up our concerns with him. He has declined to do that. I'm going to ask again that you request a postponement so that we can talk to you in the neighborhood, maybe work out something, make sure we're all on the same page. One of our big problems is one of the big problems we have is there's no real plan for how this is going to be managed. When I talked to Mr. Howie, one thing I just heard here is that there's an apartment complex in the city that currently has units being occupied. One thing that we were told in the conversation was he didn't have any experience. This is the first that they have not had any rentals, any experience on this beyond what they're putting into San Bernardino. The lack of an understanding of how to manage high density housing with an organization that hasn't done it before in a city like this, there are just too many problems. So I would ask that if Ocean Investment Group of San Clemente cannot find its way to ask for a postponement to talk to the neighborhood, that you deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Mr.
Is it all
Matley?
right to ask a question? I have a question. Is it all right?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
If you get this meeting to talk and share your concerns, what is the expectation? What is the solution? No development at all, or some changes to what is being proposed?
One thing, we have a list of concerns, and maybe they have an answer to our concerns. I mean, we had maybe a 15, 20-minute conversation. There just wasn't enough time to go into it. I laid out a lot of what our concerns were, but what we really need is to have a discussion. So it is possible that some of our concerns they've got addressed. Maybe there's some of our concerns that they can address. Maybe there's some changes they can make to address some of our concerns. But we haven't had the conversation, so we don't know. As you know, we were here a month ago asking you guys to actually approve a 19-unit complex just 2 blocks away from this. That was, and it had all the aspects we were looking for, right? It was well managed. It was designed to attract a stable population. It had security at a level that we thought was
You're
very
referring
good.
to the veterans.
The veterans housing, right? So that was a 19-unit housing development there, and it's only 2 blocks away. I mean, so
that adds to the density.
it adds to the
as you're
density,
saying.
exactly right.
So
And there's pros and cons, right? I mean, we know that density is an issue, so that's a negative. The question is, what's the positive coming out of it? How do you manage that? It's not that a complex like this can't be managed. We know it can be, but we have not seen how it's going to be managed. We don't know how this is. I mean, for all we know, this becomes rent it out to whoever's going to pay, and then we just have another crime problem in our neighborhood. We don't know. We haven't had a chance to talk. We don't know what the plan is. And we have a developer who acknowledged to me this afternoon that they have absolutely no experience in managing multi-unit housing. And this is really not the town, and especially not the neighborhood, to be experimenting and learning about that business. It would be very helpful if we had a conversation beforehand and made sure that this thing was, if the thing's going to be built, not just that it's going to be a moneymaker, but that 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's actually a benefit to the neighborhood and to the city, and not just one more place the police have to send troops every Saturday night.
Yeah, Mr. Matley, you answered the question I was going to ask, because I was going to say that the VA units that we approved are only a couple blocks from there, from that location.
Yeah, less than 2 blocks,
Yeah.
yes.
The, this unit here, I guess across the street on Arrowhead or down the street, there's another set of units that have been refurbished, similar to that?
Yeah, so what I understand is, and I did not know about this until just today, that I guess same organization got just categorized to this at 16th and Arrowhead got approval to refurbish, to rebuild those, what was it, a commercial property into this, but that's not been done yet. Now, I just heard that apparently there are units operating down near 9th Street that they do have tenants in. Obviously, if it's operating, we would like to see that. In the conversation we had this afternoon, though, that was not talked about. What I got was, this is kind of the first time in that we've done this sort of thing. So we have a lot of questions, we have a lot of concerns, and it's not that the answer has to be no. I mean, right now, I will tell you, I think the answer has to be no right now until a lot of these concerns. As you know, we're not a not in my backyard group of people, and we're not a say no to every development type people, but we have a group of people here that have lived in this neighborhood for a long time. We know what fits in the neighborhood and what looks good in the neighborhood, and we know what looks like a problem in the neighborhood, and this kind of has all the smell of a problem about it. And maybe we're wrong, but until we have this conversation, we don't know that we're wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Matley, and I appreciate the speakers and your concern about your neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Quintero. Yes.
Mr. Graham, help me. The city has a program, actually it's a state mandated program for training managers, I believe. I'm trying to talk from what I remember, to manage the things they have to go through, the questions they have to go through, I can't remember exactly how all that went. Can you explain some of that?
I actually think Mark is probably much better prepared to explain the nuances of the crime-free multi-housing to the commission.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Yes, there is a crime-free multifamily housing program that the city does mandate every property owner that has 4 or more units, rental units on the property. That is managed through the community policing division within the police department, and there is a 8-hour training program that the managers go through, that the property owners go through, and then there is an annual certification. Code enforcement is an issue that the city has been addressing, I think, more aggressively in the last couple of years. There was recent changes, structural changes, organizational changes, where code enforcement has now been consolidated under the police department. Captain Rich Lawhead is the captain that's overseeing that group. So there are a lot more resources. We recognize, staff recognizes, that yes, there are neighborhoods that tend to be more problematic than other neighborhoods, but it is something that the City Council is taking very seriously, that staff is taking very seriously, and there's definitely a very focused effort on addressing the issues that can come with multifamily housing. If it's not managed well, if anything's not managed well, it's going to be a problem, whether it's a shopping center, whether it's an industrial building, or whether it's an apartment building. But to answer your question, Commissioner Wilbur, yes, there's a very detailed program that every multifamily housing property goes through.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Huh? Yeah, there's another speaker. Patricia Quintero?
Hi, good evening. Last name? Last name is Quintero. I live on 363 17th Street. My husband and I just moved in, the middle of April, and we've had problems with people parking in front of our house. We actually end up having to park in the alley in the back. And I go to work actually at 3:30 in the morning, and it's scary going through that alley. And so this structure is like right by my house. So I'm more worried about, 15 units. And I actually, we moved over here and we met our neighbors and we loved it here. We moved from Diamond Bar, so it's a culture shock for us. So for me to find out that we're going to get something like this, I'm more worried about, like, is it going to be Section 8? Is it going to be low income? Is it going to be, I don't even know. But when I see this, I get scared because I already see, living there for 2 months, the area. And if it wasn't for my neighbors, I wouldn't feel safe. And I have little kids that I drive all the way to Diamond Bar, so that way they can go to school over there, because I want to feel safe in my own neighborhood. And I sometimes I don't. So to me, having something like this, it's scary. Because you don't live there, I'm going to live there. And I'm going to have to deal with it. So that's my concern. My concern is, am I going to feel safe at night having 15 people, not basically 15 people, because you're going to have 1-bedroom apartments, and I know for a fact that it's not just going to be one person living in there. It's going to be multi-families, because even though you have a person that's watching this place, I know for a fact that it's not going to just be 1 bedroom for 2 people. They're going to have children, they're going to have cousins, they're going to have different people in there. So my concern is, how am I going to keep these people from parking in front of my house, which I can't even park there, and how I'm going to keep them from not being in the alley? So that's my concern. So to me, it's like you guys have to also put yourselves in our shoes. We live there. We have to deal with this. And I just moved there, so I'm planning to stay there for years. Anyhow, that's how I feel. I live there, and I actually love my neighborhood. But at the same time, at night, it's kind of scary. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
What did you say your address was? I'm sorry, I missed that part. What your address where you live?
363 17th Street.
Okay.
So it's right on the alley.
Gerardo Quintero?
My name is Gerardo Quintero, Gerardo. Last name Quintero, Quintero, and I live on 363 West 17th Street, which is, I share the same alleyway as the office buildings are at right now. Like my wife said, we just moved here, and I love my house, I love my neighbors, and it is pretty concerning about having 15 units in a little space. I'm just wondering how they're going to do it with utilities and everything else. They're going to go, they're going to go through some really reamping. But the also concern is families are going to be what kind of housing is it going to be? Like my wife said, Section 8. What's the cost is going to be for people living there? That attracts certain kind of people, depending on the cost of the units. I love the Go app, the app that you guys have. I love it. I've used it a couple of times because I have my yard tagged. I've had furniture dumped in the alleyway also. I'm out here to support all my neighbors too. So 15 units is kind of in a little space. I'm wondering how they're going to work it, especially with the parking also, because like it's been mentioned, it's not always just one car per family. You have husband, wife, sons. You got cousins that live there. A lot of people visiting, especially on the weekends. It's going to get really packed. And like I said, like it's been said, we live there. They don't, and we're going to be living there for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Any questions from the commission?
I
Thank you.
have a question.
Yep. Question.
As far as the 15 proposed units, are they all going to be rented at market rate, or will any of them be subsidized as far as for like Section 8 or any type of low-income program that the proposed development will be participating in once it's completed?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that there's a misperception that that affordable housing is in essence low income, and that's not what we're about. Our rent rates are actually the higher end of the entire area. The amenities that go with these apartments, they all have washer and dryer hookups, you know, nice higher-end cabinetries, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. I mean, this is not a cheap product. This is not a Section 8. It's not a low income. Affordable doesn't necessarily mean cheap. It means that there's families that want to live in this area that can't afford to buy a house, okay, for whatever reasons, and there's a lot of them, but they want a quality place to live. So that's essentially our focus, and that's what we're investing in. That's what we did with 9th Street, and that's what we intend to do here. That's our product.
Thank you. And also from this proposed site going from a commercial site to residential, has there been any sort of I don't know if it would be an impact study or anything of that nature to determine whether this project would be too dense or how it would affect the surrounding neighbors within the proximity of this proposed site with the plans that are brought forward with us today? Has there been a study showing that the proposed amount of units that are being proposed on this site that was commercial that's going to be going to residential, is there anything or any sort of grounds that you guys use to substantiate the amount of units that are being proposed and whether or not or how much it will impact the surrounding neighbors within that area?
So that analysis was done as part of the overall analysis for the project, and the density really meets the density that's already currently existing in the neighborhood. So we were not going above and beyond what would normally be allowed at a similar sort of facility if it was actually constructed as an apartment unit originally.
Okay, and also in regards to parking on the street, I know several residents had spoken as to that potentially already being an existing problem, and if this proposed development moves forward, they're afraid that this project will increase the problem with parking in the area. Is there any way that we can discourage parking on the street within this proposed development we have, perhaps with either a fire lane or no parking within a certain time to sort of help keep the streets from being congested from the additional parking that may be incurred from this development?
I think for the most part, some of those already exist, but it's also my understanding one of the points that was brought up was about the street sweeping, and I believe our Public Works Department is working on posting signs so that vehicles will have to move certain days of the week to allow for the street sweeping. Obviously, people will still need to find a place to park, but I don't think that that's going to be alleviated anytime soon, regardless of what kind of development is at this particular site.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Yeah, I'll just follow up quickly on what Chantal mentioned. The city and all cities are required to meet certain federal clean water standards, and as part of that, regular street sweeping is a requirement. As Chantal noted, the Public Works Department is currently putting together a program for time-of-day street sweeping, which a lot of cities have, where you can park on one side of the street in the morning and the other side of the street in the afternoon, or they'll alternate days or alternate weeks. So that is something that's currently being evaluated. We are required to do that by both our state clean water permit and our federal clean water permit, so that should be implemented within the next 12 to 24 months, because the speakers are correct. Street sweeping now doesn't happen in a lot of places within the city because the street sweepers just can't get to the curb lane. So that is something that the city is working to address and should be in place within the next 2 years.
I have a question. One of the speakers asked if you would be willing to ask for postponement. What's your answer to that?
So in talking with the Maitleys, my response was that, well, first I do, well, on behalf of my partners and myself, we appreciate, everybody's feedback and concern. And what we're trying to express is that we believe we're part of the solution, and there is a problem there. The problem existed way before we've ever taken possession of these properties. And the problem is not going to go away. So I understand the frustration. I see that. I live that. I'm in the city, almost every day. And what we have and what this whole adaptive use program is doing is trying to take and turn that situation around to a positive, healthy community, as opposed to the vacant buildings that are currently, exist throughout this whole entire area. And so my discussion with them was that we're very open to, a roundtable discussion. I have cards. I told them I would bring extras to hand out and discuss these things. We're preparing. We need to move forward from the Planning Commission to prepare for a city council, and that was plenty of time for us to have these types of discussions so that we can bring everybody up to speed in terms of what we're really doing and how we feel that we're positively impacting, that area. So we're open to that idea, but we do need to move forward.
Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Matley, what is your response to having a roundtable between now and the time you go to the city council?
I asked for the conversation with them. So yes, we want to have a conversation. We want the developer in the room. We'd like to have the designer in the room. We'd like to have the city representatives in the room so that we have a conversation and figure out what needs, what is that we need to be working on. So we're asking in favor, but we would very much like it if the planning commission did not approve this until after that conversation has been had.
Thank you. Is there any chance that this could be sent back to the Development Review Committee?
I have some comments though before we get to...
Okay.
I know it was mentioned that you already called the police on, I guess, an apartment complex that's either on 7th...
I haven't called on them in years, but
Chair, if we're going to have, we really need it from the microphone.
Yep.
So it can be part of the record.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Well, I think I heard Debbie say there's a place there already, and a lot of calls have come in.
Right across the street. Yeah.
That was brought up when the veterans group wanted to establish there, which I know you guys were ecstatic about. And I think I was told by Mark that they were already on the radar with code enforcement and the police. I don't know the details or anything like that, but that's what I was told. The other thing in this thing about coming to the table, I've heard some residents who just said they didn't want it. I heard you and others say, we have concerns. But when you open that, I hope it's under consideration that we're talking about a compromise, addressing and the solutions and so forth, because we do need affordable housing. Unfortunately, that street of Arrowhead used to be a business section. And as noted by the staff, it's been difficult to even rent that space for businesses. There are no businesses that are going to come there. It was an active business, and I think it was zoned for business. I don't know, I guess it's not zoned for that anymore, but there are no businesses that are wanting to relocate there.
There's a very small number of businesses. Yeah, you're right.
You know, so when you ask for an opportunity to come to the table and express your concerns, I'm taking it as we're going to work towards a solution with the developer to address some of these concerns. Now, some of the concerns that you have mentioned really are not within the developer's purview to correct. Like you mentioned, children will have to walk through a low-income, crime-ridden to get to Paris Hill Park, that's not his fault.
Well, that's not. The reason why I brought that up was that was a finding of fact in the document, and we want to make it clear that we dispute a number of the findings
I
of fact.
understand it, but when to consider some of those things, is it the applicant's fault? Is it for him to clear up the crime there, build a bridge so that the children can? It's not that, you know. So I just want to make sure
certainly
that if we agree, and if the developer is saying and you are saying you'd like to, my expectation is that you guys are going to work it out. Not everything is going to be within the developer's part, because it's not. The city doesn't even also have, you know, it happening where they're cleaning up the crime and all. It's a very difficult thing. But that it's going to come back with, we've agreed and these are the solutions, and it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but you did have that opportunity.
Well, I can tell you this, okay? I cannot tell you right now that I guarantee that we will come to an agreement that we say up, right? But I do think our neighborhood association has several years of background in terms of talking. I don't think we've ever come to you and on one side of an issue or another without having talked to and worked with a developer first to the best of our ability. And we always want to bring in the folks from the planning department, because some of these issues can be, we've learned from experience, some of these issues can be addressed directly by the developer. Some can be addressed by having conditions put in place on the permit, right? And some of them, you're right. I mean, and part of it is, okay, where are the problems? Where are the problems that we, you know, that these are the things that we have to have? Where are the things we'd like to have? And where are the things that are like, okay, that it'd be nice to have, but we're not.
Mr. Matley, you have just put me on the hot seat.
I'm sorry.
Yes, your time is up. I think Mrs. Matley would like to make a statement. I would like to hear from her, and then we're going to close this hearing.
Okay. I thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I quickly just clarify something also? The recommendation tonight is not for approval here at the Planning Commission. It's for a recommendation to move it to the City Council, who would approve or deny as necessary. So we would have time to meet before any actual approval took place. So I just wanted to make that clear.
When you talk about compromise, I think that, you know, if maybe it were less dense, maybe not 15 units, then you'd have more parking for each unit. That could be a compromise. The parks issue, maybe there could be some green space. I realize that would take away parking, so that would be something that would need to be worked at. Maybe there can be, you know, some area that's roped off where they have a basketball hoop during the day and at night it's parking. Or there's some compromises that I think that we could do in working with the developer, and that's all we want, is the opportunity to see if we can compromise. I don't like that empty, dirty building. I don't want it an empty lot, just like I didn't want the empty lot at 17th and E Street. You know, I mean, these are both within spitting distance of my house, you know, one block. So I think we can compromise if they're willing to work and, you know, listen to some of our ideas.
Good. Let's get together and compromise. So I'll leave it to you to figure out how to do that.
Okay.
I don't like the word compromise.
Thank you.
Let's get together and work it out. All
Work
right.
it out.
There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments, or
I think
will we closed out, or did you want to have any questions?
Under the council guidelines, the applicant does have 3 minutes to make final closing comments.
Through the chair, I'd like to ask you one question.
Sure.
Actually, probably two. The way I look at it, these units are going to be close to 600, 700 square foot each unit?
Closer to 7+. Yes.
Okay. Is there a regulation that allows so many tenants in that unit? Can you have a family of 5 in that unit?
Well, not by code standards. if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that's what I'm asking. Is there a limitation to staff? Staff, can they have 3 people, 4 people, and who monitors that?
There's no standards outlined specifically in our development codes or municipal code. I believe that there are building code standards or fire code standards for the number of people that you can have in a certain area.
Okay. Another point or a question I wanted to bring up. Has there been any consideration to having senior units? There's a real lack of senior housing. Senior housing does not bring on a lot of the traffic, a lot of the young people and so on, maybe visiting on weekends, but it's just a thought. And maybe reducing the units by a few to allow a little extra room there. And I also agree, one of the reasons we turned down the veteran situation is because of a lot of situations we're seeing here. The veterans did come back after they did work with the neighborhood and made a presentation that was really agreeable to the neighbors and to the Planning Commission. So just point for thought there.
We will be prepared to discuss with the city council and have the concerns of the neighbors addressed. I think that everybody would agree that the absolute worst conditions you can have for crime and problems is what you currently have, which is a vacant building and a vacant, depleting area. And so by the fact that we are making those improvements and bringing in residents and security and orderly living environments, it's completely different from what is currently been going on for a number of years. So I think what we hear within the community is that it's a frustration of what's currently happening, and that's being expressed in terms of, well, we think that might continue to happen, especially like across the street and so forth. We despise the units that are across the street. That is not good for our investment either. And that's what I had shared with the Maitleys earlier, which is let's lock arms and work with the city to improve the circumstances, not look at ourselves as being adversaries, but jointly working together to improve the conditions that are going on in that entire area. Because I do agree that they have nice homes there and they should have a nice area, and we believe that our investment will in fact improve that entire community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion.
If I may, before there's a motion, maybe because it seems like everybody's willing to meet, that there could be a condition, number 46, added to the resolution that would read that the applicant, city staff, and the residents shall meet at least once prior to the city council taking action on this item. As Chantal has stated and as the report stated, this is a recommendation from the commission to the city council. There will be a separate, fully noticed public hearing before the city council before any final action is taken on this.
So are you saying that we can, by adding that, what you just said, the thing about the meeting, that we can make a motion to approve it?
If you're so inclined, that is
correct. With that
correct.
added condition, and allowing them the opportunity to meet and work those things before it gets to...
That is correct. If a majority of the commission is so inclined, that could be a condition which would be added here tonight.
The other alternative would be no. We don't approve. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
If there's no further discussion, I will call for a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we deny this request until the applicant and the builders, the applicant, the developer, and the neighborhood association meet and possibly come up with some recommendation to move forward to the city council.
To the chair, I just want to clarify the effect of what the Planning Commission is considering. This type of development permit, per the ordinance that the City Council adopted, has to be considered and approved by the City Council. You're making a recommendation to them now. Your recommendation is either that they approve the permit or that you recommend that they not approve the permit. Whatever your action here today, it's going to go to the council. It's either whether it's going to the council with your recommendation or not. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. However, I was reading the recommended motion here, and it says, "and approval of development permit type P," so on. So if we use the recommended motion, are we approving the development?
You are forwarding a recommendation to the mayor and city council that they approve or not approve that development permit. I know it's sort of confusing. Most other development permits under our code, in fact, I think all other development permits under our code are approved at the Planning Commission level. The City Council felt, because of the unique nature of these conversion projects, that these permits needed to be approved by the City Council. As you can see, there's a little bit of controversy with this one, too. So what you're making is a recommendation to the City Council.
Okay, so can I make a recommendation that this moves forward to the city council, but not necessarily stating that Planning Commission approves?
You could recommend that they deny it based on the fact that you felt that they haven't met adequately with the neighborhood. That sort of sounded like what you were verbalizing earlier.
Yes, I'm suggesting then perhaps that we make a motion to move it forward, indicating that the Planning Commission may not approve the development, but to keep it moving, a requirement that they meet with the city group, the neighborhood group, and that based upon their meeting and their agreements, that it gets approved.
I believe we could also continue the item and bring it back to Planning Commission before moving it forward. Is that also an option?
I'm running out of mics. That's certainly an option if the Planning Commission wanted to continue it for one meeting or more. But what it sounded like perhaps you were recommending was simply that it move on without a recommendation to approve or deny, because you think that the applicant needs to meet with the neighborhood further before it goes to the...
That is correct. I'm considering what we went through for the VA agreement and how that worked out. And when the neighborhood came back with the VA group and they had worked out some of their concerns, I think that was really a good move. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
I understand. I think that Chantal's recommendation, just in my experience in working with the council, I think they have a planning commission for a reason. They'd probably prefer that you work out these issues before it gets sent to them. So I think that that's certainly an option, that you continue it and ask that the applicant meet with the neighborhood group in the meantime. You're not going to approve or deny it tonight. That's certainly something you could do if you chose to.
Okay, then I would make the motion that we continue this until the next meeting for the neighborhood group and the developer to get together and work out what their issues are. That's my motion.
Okay, well, I don't think we can order that they work it out. I'm not sure that's possible.
I'm pretty sure they will.
But you can certainly continue it for one meeting and request that the applicant meet with the neighborhood and attempt to resolve their issues, and then report that back at the next meeting.
June 12th.
Do we have a second? Is the chair allowed to second anything?
No, the motion has to be made again to continue it, just to continue it.
Yeah, I have a motion to continue it until the next Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Giving them an opportunity to...
We have a motion and a second.
A second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
What happens here? Do we have a quorum?
Because it's not a development code amendment, you only need 3 votes to prove it, and I heard 3 ayes, although I'm not the secretary of the commission.
I think there were 4 ayes.
That's why I'm not the secretary of the commission.
Therefore,
It does. So it'll be continued to June 12th.
And that concludes the public hearing and brings us to non-public hearing items. Anyone who wishes to leave may do so now.
And Chair, it does look like the three non-public hearing items that you have are all substantially related. I think they're all based on the same facts. I don't know if we have the appellant here. So I would recommend that with their concurrence that you simply take all three at the same time.
I agree. So items 8, 9, and 10, staff report, please.
Do we need to make a motion to open all three up?
I don't think we need a motion for that.
No, we don't. Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. This item is not, it's not a discussion item, open discussion for a public forum, if I may. Our recommendation is this, we're simply bringing this back. If you recall at the last meeting, we conducted public hearings on all three items for the consideration of the revocation of the permits. The appropriate resolutions were adopted to uphold those revocations of staff. At this point, or subsequent to that meeting, the applicant has filed an additional appeal because he was not, if you recall, he was not present at that time. And so attached to your staff report, there's a request for a reconsideration of simply putting it back on the agenda. So we're not going to be discussing the item or the facts of the case or anything, or conduct any public discussion. We're simply asking whether the commission would consider agendizing the item again for the next meeting. If you so choose, the item would be placed on the next meeting, which is on June the 12th. We would send out new public hearing notices to the residents within 500 feet of the properties. We would also publish ads, public hearing notice ads in the newspaper as required by our municipal code. So really our recommendation is for you to consider whether or not you want to place this item on the next agenda.
What was the reason for the reconsideration?
If you recall, the applicant was not here at the last meeting. The letter states that the doors were locked. He was not able to find us or get inside this facility, and so he wants an opportunity to speak to the commission during a public hearing, an opportunity to do so.
I have a question. I believe the appellant also wrote a letter requesting a public hearing on this date.
Chair, I hate to interrupt. I'm very sorry. It appears that we've lost our quorum. I don't know where the fifth planning commissioner. I don't know. So I would recommend that we pause momentarily to allow the return of our fifth planning commissioner. And it looks like we have our quorum again. I would recommend that Oliver repeat what the basis for the request for reconsideration was, so that all the commissioners have that information.
Rewind the tape there, Steph, so I can remember where I left off. If I may again.
I'm sorry, I just thought Andrew was going to call a break. But
just as a recap, these three items were at the last planning commission meeting. They were considered. There was a public hearing conducted. The applicant was not present. As stated in his letter, he was not able to enter the facility, making some claims. So the request this evening is simply a request from staff. Would you be willing to re-agendize this item? It has not been advertised for tonight for a public hearing, testimony, or conversation as it relates to the merits of the revocation or the application itself. So therefore, we can't have that discussion as it relates to the individual projects. All we are asking you to do is to consider the applicant or appellant's letter, and whether to decide whether or not we should bring this back for another public hearing. If you decide to do so, we would send out the public hearing notices to the residents within 500 feet of each of the properties. And then we would also place our public hearing notices, as required by our municipal code, in the newspaper. And these two would occur at least 10 days prior to the meeting of June the 12th, if you decide to have that meeting. So we're really looking for your direction as to whether or not you want to rehear this item next month.
If we do grant a reconsideration and we put this item back on the agenda after the next meeting, these steps that we have to take in order to operate within the municipal code's framework, as far as with the notices in the mail and the newspaper notices as well, are these costs going to be incurred by the city, or will the applicant be covering the costs that we would be?
Would you mind answering that for us, Stephen?
It looked like Mark was ready to go.
Yeah, I am. The code actually mandates that the requester, because the city has incurred those costs already to mail the notices to prepare the original staff report. So any costs associated with renoticing, mailing, putting the advertisement in the newspaper are required under the municipal code to be paid by the applicant. I don't have a good number for that. I don't know what mailings are. I don't know what the cost of publications are. If you're asking my educated guess, I would say those are probably between $500 and $1,000 per application, per item. So there are 3 separate appeals, so each one of them needs to be noticed separately and advertisements put in the newspaper. So I would guess anywhere collectively for the 3 between $1,500 and $3,000.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, may I add just one thing very quickly? When we did come...
Can you please say your name?
My name is Najed Saker, N-A-J-E-D, and I live at 1137.
You know, we don't have a public hearing going on here. Let us finish our discussion here, then we'll see about calling on you. Did you have something to say?
Certainly, Chair, and I think it would be entirely appropriate after your discussion and questions to staff have concluded for you to call upon the applicant and give them an opportunity to speak. That's perfectly all right. I just wanted to give the municipal code section regarding reconsideration, which is 1952-140, which says that all costs associated with reconsideration are paid by the applicant. And then I also just wanted to, if the commission was looking for a recommendation from council, I would counsel to give the applicant an opportunity to have their hearing held. Obviously, our preference is to have hearings on the merits for the Planning Commission. We have attempted to look into what issue there may have been with access to the building. Obviously, we did have a sizable crowd here that night. All the commissioners and staff were able to get into the building, but I think we're all used to accessing it from the 5th floor of the parking structure. And the applicant's letter indicates that they tried to come in from E Street. That's certainly something that we've addressed with the security staff, although we don't have any staff evidence that the door was locked. And you can certainly listen to the applicant and weigh that credibility. It's something that we're going to ensure that does not occur in the future.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Forgot your last name? Huh? Oliver. Okay, Oliver.
Mr. Mujica was my father.
Oh, there you go. I believe the appellant wrote you a letter requesting a public hearing on this date. What was the answer to his letter?
There wasn't the opportunity to, for the procedures to occur, the mailings and so forth. Also, a decision had already been made. And so there has not been a formal process for the reapplication, if you will, of the appeals, and we had to go. This is the process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got the meeting minutes from last month, and as I read it here, there was this. I'm just picking one of them up. It says, on determination the prohibited use of which was occurring within the approved gift shop or the property. So that's the reason we're here to begin with. it was a violation of use?
Commissioner, quite right. There was an allegation that the use to which the property was being put was unlawful under our code, and so the ZVRs were revoked by staff. However, tonight is not about the actual underlying facts of that. It is about the request simply to have that hearing. So the appellant had requested to have a hearing on whether that ZVR revocation was proper, and because the applicant was not at the hearing, the Planning Commission upheld the recommendations of staff and denied that request. And then the applicant subsequently sent information to staff requesting the ability, the reconsideration, because they said they were unable to access the building. So this is a procedural question today. This is not, we're not talking about the underlying facts. I understand that, and I would also suggest to the chair that now would also be a very good opportunity to ask the applicant to speak. I know we're sort of saying what the applicant said, but it might be a good idea to actually hear from the applicant.
Okay, so just very quickly, like I said, I was here with my father and our attorney.
Can you speak into the mic?
Could you speak into the mic and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Najed Saker, Najed. I'm on here on behalf of my father, Jihad Saker. He's very sorry he couldn't be here. He's gotten very ill, and we have to check him into a physician. Going back to basically us paying for the notices to go out to the neighborhoods, we basically, to have that meeting, to appeal the zoning verification, we have to pay $3,000 per business to basically have this meeting. So when we did come, we received a letter from the city saying they were going to ask the police department to rewind the video cameras to make sure we were here at 6 o'clock. Me, myself, and my father, we were here at 5:45, and we could not open the door physically. We did come up to the fifth-story parking structure, but this is my first hearing I've had as the city of San Bernardino, so we did not know which door to access. There wasn't anybody working at the time, so we did not know. Basically, what I'm trying to ask you guys is, I understand that by the code we're supposed to pay to send out those letters, but we're kind of on our last leg with the whole, paying for the hearing, and we're still paying rent on all 3 businesses to this day just so we can have the hearing. So if you guys can, if we can come to an understanding to have the city pay to send out those letters again, only because I don't feel like it's fair for us to pay for it since we were here at 5:45 at your last meeting. We just could not enter the building. And I'm not sure if you had the chance to ask the San Bernardino Police Department to rewind the cameras to verify my claim. No, you haven't had a chance? Okay, so if we could please kind of reconsider having us to pay, because that's $1,500 per business. It's a very high cost.
Thank you. Is in regards to the actual applications and the process that's moving forward, did you guys have the opportunity to contact staff, or did you try to get a hold of anybody prior to that? I noticed in that you guys also have a counsel representing you as well. Your counsel wasn't able to prepare for this public notice meeting in regards to the operating permits for your establishment. Were you not able to reach out to anyone or get in contact with anyone to make sure that you were properly prepared to actually come to this public hearing for the dispute that you're bringing before us?
Sure. Is that addressed to me or?
Either or is fine.
Okay, my name is Raj Maleen, and I represent Jihad Shaker in the, there's a criminal case that is going on as a result of the actions of October 5th, 2017, when the San Bernardino Police Department went into these 3 businesses and confiscated some machines. So I'm representing Mr. Saker in regards to that. In addition, because it was related, this appeal regarding these locations was also borne by our firm as well, so we're handling that. Just to echo my client's sentiment on the last hearing that we were here, while we were waiting downstairs, I did call a Miss Chantel Power, because that's the letter that we received to attend the hearing, and that's who I called while we were outside of this building here at this location. Not only did we call, but I also videotaped myself that we were here when I was in front of the building to show that we were here and we couldn't access the building. I walked around the building at least 3 times. You'll see on the videotape when you do see that. And some members of the Saker family were also here walking either around the building or trying to figure out a way. We went through the Big Five to see if they knew how we could get into the building. And since neither my clients or myself have been here, and Ms. Power which is the only contact that we had in terms of a direct number, she was not answering her phone. We literally just stood there until about 6:30 or 6:40. The tape will show, and we weren't able to get in eventually. So that was our experience on that day. Of course, we subsequently learned that it's very easy if you come through the 5th floor and you just walk right in. But unfortunately, we didn't know that day. So of course, we would have been prepared that day. So that's what happened. But we are, and I know that my understanding of today is not to discuss the merits of the issues at hand. So I'm not going to do that. But I would join in my client's request to at least if the city could bear the cost of the notification, because we've borne that cost one time before, and they've also paid for the appeals in full when they were supposed to. And as a result of this action, this delay has caused them to not be in business for all this time. So I feel that regarding at least our presence the last time, and to answer your question, that we were here, we were prepared to go. We had members of the Saker family here as well, wishing to speak, and they will be again if we're given that opportunity.
You had mentioned you had surveillance or video footage from your phone showing that you were present at the location. Would you be able to present that to us, and also the time stamp and the date of that?
I'll give you what I have on my phone, sure. And also, Ms. Power had a, and I hope I'm getting her name right, but she had the, she's the one that got my voicemail as well that day when we were here. And I believe she's the one that told us that she would be looking to look at the videotape as well. I thought you guys would have viewed the videotape by now, but apparently that's not the case.
Well, we actually had made a request of the police department. Unfortunately, where the video cameras are positioned at the entrances, it was inconclusive. So the police department was not able to definitively say whether they were or were not present.
I did receive a phone call, but at the time that the phone call came in, we were already in the council chamber. So obviously, I wasn't at my desk to take the phone call. But I did notice there was a timestamp. It was a few minutes after 6 p.m., I believe. I got that the next morning when I came in.
Would you repeat your what you want from us?
Of course. Essentially, the recommendation is we're asking the commission as to whether or not you would be willing to reconsider this item. And so with that direction would come for us to renotice, set the public hearing in place for the next meeting of June 12th, and we would prepare a new staff report and present it to you at that meeting.
The appellant has paid almost $9,000 for the appeal. What happens to that money if the appeal is rejected?
Well, the appeal has already been rejected.
I mean, to reconsider the appeal, or the whatever it is we're reconsidering.
So essentially, it's similar to a new application.
In addition to the $9,000 that they've already paid, then they would have to pay additional fees for a new application. Is that right?
They would, if I can interject for a moment, the city's fees, and this is true with all fees, at least in the community development department, it is a fee for service. So the city did a very comprehensive fee study back in 2009, prior to probably anybody in this room being on city staff. So the council adopted a resolution, and that is based upon the average cost of time that it takes staff to meet with applicants, prepare staff reports, mail notices, post agendas, put the items in the newspaper. So we operate like many cities do based upon an average cost of preparing staff reports. So the fees that are paid are not a guarantee that you're going to get approval. It is to allow you to have a hearing before the appropriate body, whether that's the Development Review Committee, the Planning Commission, or the City Council. Applications that are denied, you have paid to just have your hearing. To all of us to be here in the room, that's what those costs cover. What the code says is that there is a process for reconsideration. The attorney has made that request within the 15 days. We then bring the procedural question, as Stephen has said, to the Planning Commission, and it's merely an up or down. Do you want to give them an opportunity to be heard? As Stephen has said, and I fully agree, we believe, staff believes it's appropriate to give them that opportunity to be heard. The code requires that they pay any of those fees for renoticing. Staff does not have the ability to waive those fees. I don't believe the Planning Commission has the waive those fees. The ordinance is the ordinance. Only the City Council has the ability to modify the ordinance, and they can't do that on a one-off basis. They need to do that at a noticed public hearing and go through the entire process themselves. The code is kind of designed, what I like to say, to protect people from themselves. You know, we all want to help everybody as much as we can, but there is a direct cost to the city to do that. We have to put the notice in the newspaper, we have to pay the postal service, we have to buy paper, so there is a direct cost to us doing that. So we don't have the ability, nobody in the room tonight has the ability to modify that. As much as we may want to, that is not an item that we have any say in.
And I just wanted to follow that up. Mark kind of beat me to it. The development code makes it very clear that that cost shall be borne by the applicant. The Planning Commission staff does not have the authority or the ability to waive that fee. So while the Planning Commission can certainly sympathetic to the applicant and their desire to have that additional hearing, the question before you is merely, do you want to give the applicant the opportunity to have the hearing at the next available opportunity?
The thing that I'm still somewhat confused about is what happens to the $9,000 that they paid in for the appeal? I mean, have you actually done $9,000 worth of work in connection with this appeal?
Yes, we have.
So I'd like to address that if I can. Like Mark said, the fees are set by the City Council. This is not a per hour fee. They're calculated on, you know, the appeal that's requested, what the average time is going to be, so the city can recover those costs. There's a whole public hearing process we have to go through under the government code to set those fees up. I don't advise staff when they're bringing appeals, but I am familiar with the process they go through, and I believe they were fully prepared. They worked that appeal up. The applicant simply wasn't here. And so the question of what, did that $9,000 go to? That $9,000 went to all the notices, all the staff work that went into preparing for a hearing. And now the question before you is, because the applicant say they were unable to enter the building, would you like to give them the opportunity to have that hearing? But they've requested the reconsideration, so they would like to have that additional hearing.
I have a question to that. Since the staff has already prepared their arguments and the paperwork and so on, is there any consideration given to not applying the full $9,000?
Oh no. So the code requires the costs of the reconsideration be applied.
Okay.
So this is not a full-on additional appeal fee. It's going to be the cost of basically sending out the notices.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Just to clarify that, Commissioner Jones said, what is the cost? Mm-hmm. I'm estimating it's approximately $500 to $1,000 per request. It could be lower than that. We will find out in the next few days what it costs to actually do that, and we will inform the applicant what that cost is. So the question was asked, how much? It is a guess on my part that it's between 500 and 1,000.
Does the appellant have any more comments?
We understood we understood it the way this gentleman just indicated, that we're not repaying the 9,000, we're just repaying the notice fees. Although we would like to somehow avoid that, but obviously I'm hearing that we can't, so we understand that.
Thank you. Anything else from the commission? If not, I will call for a motion to reconsider. Yes.
Consider this item at the next meeting of June the 12th. All three items, please.
I would make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to reconsider. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
So just to be clear for everybody, all three appeals, 1702, 1703, and 1704, will be renoticed, and there will be a full public hearing on June 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a report except to say that the major projects list, because we've had a turnover in staff, we haven't done one in the last month or so. The May report will be available and will be online on Thursday, and I will email it directly to all of the commissioners. And I do apologize for being late. That concludes my report.
What was the turnover in staff?
Melina Perez, who used to sit where Stephanie is sitting, she was promoted and transferred to the police department.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion is carried.